And hello, everyone. We thank you for joining us for today's e-showcase. Lloydminster embraces collaborative delivery model to maximize the value of their next generation wastewater treatment upgrade. I want to take just a brief moment to thank our sponsor, Veolia. Thank you, Veolia, for sponsoring today's event. And without further ado, I will hand the presentation to Robert and Dawn.
Thanks, Regina. Hi, everyone. We're just going to share our screen here. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the City of Lloydminster's next generation wastewater treatment plant upgrade and the collaborative delivery model they used to make that project a success for them, to maximize the value and to build that infrastructure asset for the city. I am pleased today to be joined by Don Stang. Don, I'm going to give you a minute or two just to introduce yourself to everybody here.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and good afternoon to everybody. My name's Don Stang. I've been with the City of Lloydminster now for about 16 years. I've been involved in operations for most of my career, have overseen and been a part of the engineering team since I started. And in particular, the project we're talking about here today, our new mechanical wastewater treatment facility. I was the SMT, or the senior management team member for City of Lloyd on that project. So welcome, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. And to everybody, I'm Rob Hacking. I look after most of the large projects for Veolia's municipal business in particular. I spend my time helping cities like Lloydminster build wastewater treatment plants or drinking water plants or biosolids thermal destruction plants in North America. So that's the who. The what today, we're going to give you a little bit of an insight into project background and the problem statement. We're going to talk about the collaborative contract model we use today. We're going to show you the project partners selection and contract and how that all went. Obviously, how this collaborative delivery model overcame some of the challenges, and there were some fairly significant ones in the middle of the construction of this one. Obviously the project results, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end, I'm sure. If you have questions there, we'll do our best to answer it. So Don, I'm going to let you talk about the city for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So City of Lloydminster is a municipality that straddles Alberta and Saskatchewan border. We have the border actually runs directly right through the middle of our city. 60% of our population is on the Alberta side, 40% on Saskatchewan side. If you're looking at a map and unfamiliar with our area, we're about two and a half hours from a major center in Alberta, the capital of Alberta, Edmonton, and 2.5 hours east or west of Saskatoon, which is one of the larger municipalities in Saskatchewan. So we're right in the middle of those two areas. Our city has, even though we're on two sides of the border, we have one council and one mayor. With being kind of Canada's unique border city, I think we're the only border city in Canada. We experienced some funding challenges. Some of the things we have to deal with, and in particular we dealt with on this project, is trying to get both Alberta province and Saskatchewan province to provide grant funding for our large municipal project and to be on that at the same time. So, you know, it was easy for us to get Saskatchewan on board early on. It was a little bit harder to get the provincial government in Alberta to come to the table with grant funding, but in the end, our mayor and council did a good job and brought that forward. Our city consists of, I don't have the total number of kilometers of pipelines, but in a general statement, all our sanitary flows to the northeast of our city. We have an entirely gravity-fed system. We do have one sanitary lift station that services just our golf course building, but that's the only service on there. So outside of that, all our sanitary flows through a gravity system. And then at the northeast corner of our city is where our water treatment plant is located. The new wastewater treatment facility was built right on the same site as the old one and integrated portions of that facility into our new build. Just some other notes there. I noticed we also Cenovus Energy is one of our it is our largest employer in town and has multiple facilities. We have a refinery inside our city boundary, and then on the east side of Lloydminster, south of Highway 16, they have an upgrader there. And that these two infrastructure that Cenovus has in the city did play into a little bit of our decision-making process along the way, and I'll get into that maybe a little bit later. So our existing wastewater treatment plant serviced our city for many years. It was built in the early 80s. At our facility, so all our sanitary, as I said, comes into the wastewater treatment plant from the city. It goes through a core screen. From the core screen, it goes into irrigated lagoons, which you can see on the picture. We have 3 lagoons. The first 2 there, cells 1 and 2, are the irrigated lagoons, and then the final buffering and storage lagoon on the very north end, cell 3. From cell 3, we have a effluent pump station, and that pump station pumps our effluent back to the North Saskatchewan River, and that is about a 40 to 50 kilometer push for our pump. So that is how we get our water back to the North Saskatchewan River through a 40 kilometer, or I can't think of the conversion off the top of my head into miles, but you can calculate that 1.6 kilometers per mile. We pump back to the river. We also bring our raw water from the river to treat for potable water that same distance. Another uniqueness of our city is we don't have a river running through our municipality. We have just neighboring municipalities, 2 RMs on the east side, the RM of Britannia, RM of Wilton. And then on the west side of the city, obviously in Alberta, it's a county, and that's the County of Vermilion River. To date, hasn't been a lot of conversation around a regional hub for bringing effluent to our plant for treatment, but those, since our construction project, that's some of the things we've been talking about. And then there is a neighboring wetland. We call it our Neely Edmund Complex, which again is a wetland that flows stormwater. Specifically, 90% of the stormwater from the city flows through this wetland, and eventually hits the North Saskatchewan River about 60 kilometers to the east. So our problems in Lloydminster, they start, Lloydminster's, I've told this story quite a bit, but Lloydminster's story probably starts 10 to maybe even 15 years prior. We, as a city, grew very, very quickly between the 90s, early 2000s. I think our growth projections were in 15 to 20% some years. So the existing plant, although it was new in 1980s, we outgrew that facility fairly quickly, and the last 10 years we had previous to our new plant had issues meeting the requirements of the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency for effluent discharge. Our biggest issues were ammonia and yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but ammonia was our big one. We couldn't get the ammonia out. Um, City of Lloydminster, obviously with that 10 years of not being able to be fully compliant just because our plant had outgrown its ability to serve the population. The federal government ultimately came to the city and said, you're not doing anything about this. We're going to force you to do something. So they issued us a directive. Actually, the directive we were issued was issued in 2018, and that was to be compliant by December of 2020. As we got moving on the project, we asked the federal government for an amendment to that, and ultimately they gave us until December 2023 to be compliant. Part of the condition of that, we had to show them that we were actually moving forward with the project, and they provided that to us after we started validation. As part of that directive, we were if we weren't compliant by their date they had given us, the city was facing $1 million fines per day. I believe they were threatening, and as well, our mayor was subject potentially to jail time. So it was a pretty serious directive that the city of Lloydminster took extremely serious and needed to find a resolution to that. So as part of, that process and part of the problems we were trying to solve was we had a very tight timeline or a schedule to be operating and meeting the regulatory requirements from the Water Security Agency of Saskatchewan in a very short time frame. That was 2.5 to 3 years maximum in order to get a new wastewater treatment plant built. So we were very critical on schedule. The other thing we were very tight on was, and every municipality probably has the same issue that we were dealing with, was funding. We had very little fund in order to go forward this. When we had started looking at putting grant applications into the federal and provincial uh, uh, parties, we thought our plant was going to be in that $75 million range. So that's what we had applied for with our grants. There was about a 4-year gap from our first grant application to when we actually received grants. So in that 4 years, our project cost was, evaluated a little bit further. And I think we ended up on a max budget of $81.5 million. And that was just based on the grants we were going to receive from federal and provincial funding, and actually what the city could afford to borrow in order to pay for that plant. So our borrowing capacity was very limited. We only had so much money to go around. So we needed extreme cost certainty. We needed to know exactly what the plant was going to cost so we could ensure that we had enough borrowing capacity in order to put our share of the funds, which at the end of the day, we got a provincial funding from both Alberta and Saskatchewan to pay for 1/3 of the 75 million. The federal government of Canada paid for 1/3 of the 75 million, and the city paid for the remainder, up to $81.5 million, which was our project cost target. We also wanted to be I wouldn't say we wanted to be innovative, but we wanted to be innovative a little bit. And we wanted to be forward thinking in our infrastructure and make sure that whatever we build here is going to be able to be sustainable for the city of Lloydminster for the long term. So as regulations change, that we have the ability to meet those requirements. And we also were looking at some other opportunities with reuse and alternative discharges, and I'll touch on those points a little bit later on as well. So the IPD model, I don't know if everybody on the webinar is familiar with integrated project delivery. It is a relatively new project delivery for Canada in particular, and I believe it's fairly new in the United States. So integrated project delivery was a model that city administration myself and my director of planning and engineering were introduced kind of as we were going through the grant funding process. We hadn't got all our grants in place yet, and we were trying to figure out what project delivery we were going to use. And there's many that we had contemplated, including, you know, bid build or design bid build, bid build, CM, construction management, P3 we even contemplated. So we were trying to figure out what delivery model was the best, and IPD was very, very intriguing to us for a couple main reasons. As I spoke to earlier, we had two major issues: cost certainty and we had a tight schedule. So IPD allowed us to meet those two requirements. So from a cost certainty perspective, the way IPD works is the parties that are part of the IPD contract, CCDC 30, develop a validation report, and that validation report essentially is some upfront design work and some guarantee costing for the owner, where the parties tell exactly what they're going to build, how they're going to build it, and for what cost. And then the owner has the ability, after they've been presented the validation report, to give their approval to move forward or not move forward at that time. Also, part of that validation report is a schedule. So the parties put together their construction design and construction schedule, and that's part of that validation report as well. So a couple other reasons we picked IPD. IPD is an extremely collaborative model. It includes all parties up front in the project planning, design, validation report. All parties are part of that process. So you have your designers, your engineers sitting in the same room as your technology vendors, and your constructors. Our general contractor was also a part of those design pits and validation process. It was an innovative project delivery that allowed us as a municipality to be an industry leader, and I believe we were definitely the very first to deliver a wastewater treatment facility of this magnitude, specifically with a technology vendor as one of our parties. I believe that was in North America. I could be corrected on that, for surely in Canada. Rob's shaking his head. I do believe we were first in North America to do that. So that was something we were extremely proud of. And the contract, how the contract works, and with the collaborative model, it contractually binds all parties to have to work together. Excuse me. Have to work together to be collaborative, to solve problems, to ensure that the project costs don't come in over budget, and to have a share in the profit when the project comes in under budget, and to be accountable for any costs when it becomes over budget. Again, you know, as I stated on the slide here, the shared rewards, there's shared rewards in on both positive and negative. On the positive side, if you can build a project, if our target cost was 81.5 million, if we built it for 80 million, that $1.5 million cost savings gets shared between all 5 parties, and that's a contractual obligation. And then if the project goes over that budget, then the parties involved are responsible to build the project at cost. And then lastly, one of the big ones here too was cost transparency. So as part of the IPD process, all parties involved have their books audited, and that they are charging actual amounts. So, you know, if I'm working for company A and they're billing me out at $100, the audit process showed exactly why they are charging me for $100, and that is actual cost, and that they're not charging that at an inflated cost. And then throughout the project, all all tenders, all costs are subject to the entire SMT and PMT scrutiny. So there is transparency throughout the project, and that was something that our council as well as our administration felt was extremely important for this project. So one of the things we have to do as an administration, and this was something I personally was accountable for as the SMT member, was convincing our senior management team here at the city as well as our council why IPD was the right choice to go down. Again, being the first to deliver a project like this was a little uneasy, and I do believe that a lot of people around our organization felt that it was almost too good to be true. But all our research and discussion we had with industry experts helped us get a little better understanding and a lot more comfortability in the process. So how we went about getting buy-in of council and our administration, we established a project steering committee. We included all our departments from City of Lloydminster, including finance, procurement. We even brought our mayor into the steering committee just so he could be a part of that process and help the rest of council understand what we were trying to accomplish. And then we established an owner's requirements, goals, and constraints, and I'll get to that just here in a minute. We brought a lot of industry experts in. We brought parties in that had delivered, fire halls through IPD or, a school expansion, those types of projects. We brought them in to kind of help us understand the IPD process, what the risks were in going down an IPD and what the rewards were. From our research, yes, there are some risks to it, but we felt the reward outweighed that risk tenfold. And then we presented that to council at a public council meeting, and on July 3rd, 2019, council approved by resolution allowing administration to proceed with the IPD delivery model as our procurement process. So our goals, requirements, and constraints, I'm not going to go through all of these in a lot of detail, but I just want to kind of let the audience know the importance of this document. So this document was used by our steering committee team to understand what we are trying to achieve in building a new wastewater treatment facility. And then this document kind of became the ingrained direction from the city to the project team on what we valued in the project and what we felt was important. So obviously the cost, we did not want the project or the cost to exceed $81.5 million. And in IPD, when you're looking at that, the city didn't have any direction on what type of plant was to be built. We just needed a mechanical wastewater treatment plant that was going to meet the requirements, and it couldn't exceed $81.5 million. We wanted to ensure that it was an environmentally resilient and sustainable facility. So our council didn't want to be in a situation that we were currently in where, 5 years down the road, the regulatory body changed requirements and then our plant couldn't meet those requirements. So we wanted a plant that was resilient to that. We also were very interested in reuse. So we, again, as I stated, Cenovus is one of our large employers and they have some facilities around here. Lloydminster is a very oil and gas driven city. It is our meat and potatoes for our economy. And water is a very lucrative entity. Everybody's looking for water, whether that's for their processed water in order to treat their oil or they're using it to generate steam for SAGD recovery. So water was something that we felt if we could build a plant that allows us to sell water for industry to reuse within their processes. Number one, we're limiting how much water then we're pulling out of the North Saskatchewan River, so we're environmentally sustainable there. And on the other part of that is that the city would have some opportunity to generate some revenue. So that was very important for us. So we wanted a plant that had the ability to produce that. We wanted a plant that had solid management, cost-effective way of dealing with that. Again, the future resiliency, ease of expansion, our pathway to future regulatory requirements. Something easy to operate. Schedule was important. It needed to be built within the directive we had laid out. Leadership and innovation, I think that speaks to the model we chose with IPD. We wanted to be an industry leader in showing municipalities that there are different ways of doing things, and there are definitely benefits to thinking outside the box sometimes. And then transparency. Obviously, we wanted to be transparent to our constituents. In particular, around this time, we had a fairly new council, and that was one of the things they were extremely important to them, was being transparent on how much money we're spending, where are we spending it, why are we spending it. So those were our goals, requirements, goals, and constraints. And again, these were used for the entire project by the IPD team, as you know, this is what the city is expecting to get from the project team. So procurement of our partners. This was an interesting process because nobody had done it before, and as a municipality, we had to kind of think on our toes a little bit and try to figure out what approach we were going to take with this. You know, to start, we had a very long-term relationship with our owner's engineer who became a partner on this project, and I'll kind of explain that in a little bit. So our owner engineer had been working on a solution to the wastewater treatment plant for probably close to 5-6 years prior to us getting here. So we used them as kind of our collaborative team to come up with what approach we were going to use to procure parties and how we were going to do that. So what we ended up doing was putting out a RFP, or a request for proposals, on a qualification-based selection. So for those that don't know what qualification-based selection is, it's based on the company's ability to deliver specific or the components, and not necessarily on price. Although in this process, we had asked everybody that put a bid in on our project to include a profit expectation. So the first procurement that we did, the first qualification-based procurement we did in partnership with our owner's engineer, was for GC. So we put that procurement out. We brought GC in. The documents were focused on IPD understanding. So there's many components. So understanding of their share of the work. So from a GC perspective, ability to deliver large construction projects. But we also had a real high focus on, do you know what integrated project delivery is? Do you understand what collaborative delivery is, and do you have experience in that? And do you have people that fully understand that model? So that was an important piece we included in our procurement documents. Again, proponents were asked to submit their profit expectations. This really didn't come into factor until we got into the negotiation of the CCDC 30 contract, which is the contract we use to deliver this project. Once parties were procured, we brought them into the selection process. So again, we started out with us as the owner and our owner's engineer. We procured the general contractor. The general contractor then formed part of our team to procure our technology vendor, and then again, our technology vendor joined the owner, the owner's engineer, the general contractor to procure our electrical and instrumentation party. So as we brought members in, they became part of our team and they became part of our process for that full selection. We again, order of how we went through the procurement. We procured our engineer, general contractor, technology vendor, and our electrical instrumentation. And kind of rule of thumb with IPD is you want to have over 80% of the work covered by your main partners on the CCDC 30 contract. And the 5 parties included here probably represented 90+% of that work. The owner's engineer, again, back to that, we had a long-standing relationship with them. They were already doing some evaluations and reports on some of that. So we essentially turned their owner's engineer contract into the CCDC 30 contract and signed them on as a proponent. So we never did publicly procure our owner's engineer, and that was approved by council as well. Sorry, back to that slide just real quick. Profit expectations, again, they were identified in a procurement, and for the most part, they didn't formulate part of the evaluation process, but from a city's perspective, we did look and understand what those profit expectations were. We used that when we entered into our CCDC 30 contract. Those profit margins were used to establish the validation report costing, and it also became and formulated part of the CCDC 30. So there was a component of price integrated in, but it not your traditional price integration. At the end of the day, our IPD team consisted of the City of Lloydminster as the owner. We had ISL Engineering Land Services out of Edmonton as our owner's engineer and the engineer on the project. The general contracting partner, Bird and Shandos, joined together and submitted as a joint venture. And I do believe the reason for their joint venture was particular around the IPD. I think some parties, they had a better understanding of IPD than they did standing alone. So they decided to join as joint venture. And then Veolia as our technology vendor, past used to be Suez, they're Veolia now, they were our technology vendor. And then Magna for engineering was our electrical instrumentation and controls. And on June 30th, after the validation report was finalized, council directed administration to move forward with the integrated project delivery.
All right, and Don, I know you were part of this, but
Yeah.
I certainly had some experience here with onboarding and early work. So, here we are. We've got our team together now. City's keen to see progress being made. Not chew up too much time in the schedule. And luckily enough, Don and others had made this amazing big room space available for everybody to do some onboarding. And this was quite important for IPD. Certainly, Suez Veolia at the time, we didn't have a lot of experience with IPD here and there on industrial projects, but we needed to learn some of the language and some of the mechanisms of being part of an IPD team. So we spent some time talking about, getting together, knowing all the people that are in the room, where they come from, what their backgrounds are, how, what their personalities are. Really just trying to gel that team, and that's the case for many collaborative projects, but in particular with IPD, this is something quite important. A lot around culture and how we're going to treat each other, what's going to happen when we have a problem, How do we maintain respect and make sure people's voices are always heard, that there's some inclusion for everyone there? How to make decisions, right? One of the negatives when you have people collaborating like this is that it can be tough making decisions, right? You don't have one authority necessarily making a decision at speed. You have to often rely on processes for how to make decisions. So we talked about using A3 as a decision-making procedure, choosing by advantages. We talked about pool planning and last planner and lots of concepts that are talked about in lean construction. We tried to ground everybody in the setting here, and we brought in some coaches on some of those. We talked a lot about BIM and how we were going to use BIM and some other tools as well on how that can be a good way to bring collaborative design together. We aligned people, so don't worry about trying to read the org chart there. The point of that is that there's many different groups in our project team. We call them PITs, or project implementation teams. And we had to make sure that those teams had the right people in them from different companies, and the right ability to make decisions. Don mentioned he was part of the SMT, or the senior management team. The people in that team need to be at a level that they can make decisions for the project or resolve issues for the project. PMT, or project management team, you need to be familiar with project management. You know, what are you reporting? What are you recording? What are you measuring? What are we going to do about things if they're not going the way that we want? And I, for one, was lucky enough to be part of the process pit, which is kind of where my heart lies. So we got to deal with process issues. We also got to ground everybody on the site in the background for the plant, and try to understand that problem statement and some of the issues. Right, it was funny listening to the problem statement. Right, federal government says you have to upgrade your wastewater plant, otherwise you're in big trouble. We've got a budget, we've got a schedule. But then when you start looking, you see a city that has 50% or more of its water consumed by large industrial users, and a wastewater discharge pipeline that is becoming a liability as it ages. And you know, this is where the reuse idea started coming in. So, you know, without some of that background, you would have had folks in this room thinking, why are we talking about reuse? We don't need reuse water quality to go back to the North Saskatchewan River. We can do that at half the quality that we're talking about for reuse. So that was quite useful, I think, in getting all the people on the project to understand the owner's goals and constraints, the city itself, and the problem statement at its core. We then had to get into basis of design and technology selection. You know, really where we're going in this early stage is getting to what Don had referred to before as a validation report, which is something that you can put in front of council and say, do you agree that you want us to build this? So, you know, we had to agree on a influent flow basis of design, which is largely reliant on a population projection, which in a city like Lloydminster, with its growth rates that can be quite high, or you know, typical for a city of its size, you know, even that took some discussion. We had to decide to use a primary clarifier for minimizing energy, which aligns with the sustainability goal, but also for protection against debris and contaminants in the collection system there. There are a number of contaminants that can be damaging for a new mechanical wastewater plant. So we talked for quite a bit about, is this a worthwhile investment for the city to do something like this? We decided that it was. We decided to build an NBR plant for high quality water. So we wanted to get the city away from being reliant on this pipeline and be able to produce either reuse water or water that would be able to be discharged into a local water body closer to the city. And so we went through all the different technologies that could be used, the different effluent qualities that you could expect for them, and we decided to land on NBR. We decided to use one of the existing lagoon cells for biosolids storage. A good use of existing infrastructure. It's simple. And we're going to use the other 2 existing lagoon cells for wet weather storage. We have a gravity collection system in the prairies where we are here. We have a lot of spring snowmelt in the springtime, which creates large wet weather flows. We also have a lot of heavy rainfall events during thunderstorm season in the late summer in particular. And we can see that in the historical data for the city. So we got to basis of design, we got to a technology selection as a group. We wrote a validation report, right? What are we building? What will it do? How much will it cost? How much will it cost to do what it does? How long will it take? And how will we measure the team's progress as we go along? And we submitted that to council on August 2020. And as Don said, they approved it. You know, when I think back, I think collaborative design, collaborative delivery, it's all about turning design into construction progress quickly. And yes, you have to have a good design to do that and the right design. But the integration of those 2 areas was particularly interesting here. And Don, I don't know if you remember this, but in the big room, we had this big wall that we had taped off, like you can see there in the background. And we had put the schedule up in weeks for how we were going to build this plant, from when we could start to when the plant had to be operating. And then we had all the work that we had to do along the way to get there. And you could see, I mean, you did not have to be a project manager. You could see there were areas in that schedule that had so much work being done in such a short amount of time that it was never going to work. And we called that a schedule of despair, because we looked at it and we were like, this schedule does not work. We ended up making, we ended up having to be very careful about making decisions on ideas. You know, innovation and cost-saving ideas and value engineering. We can chew up a lot of time and a lot of people's focus on those. Again, in a collaborative setting, you get lots of different opinions. You got to get it down to a very concise decision-making matrix that you can decide, good idea, you know, put it on the shelf, or not a good idea. We did a ton of BIM model reviews, you know, really good for operations staff to come along to those and have their input, and constructors. Very important in enclosed spaces or tight spaces. You know, it's all very well designing large pipe runs, you know, but how do we get the pipe in the room and get it up there efficiently and not stop other work going on at the same time? BIM here was useful and also fun. I looked forward to the BIM model review every week. Having a good relationship with the regulator is also very important if you want speed. We developed a good relationship with the regulator very early on. You know, they had their procedure, but we ended up being able to ask questions like, what do you need? What do you need from us to be able to give us a permit or allow us to proceed, or, you know, approve of the next step in the construction project?
Rob, just real quick on that acceleration, like the IPD allowed us, you know, in that pole planning Rob was talking about, it allowed us to identify what can be designed today and start construction while we're designing other things down the road. Without that process, we would have never hit our schedule target. So yeah, IPD allowed us to really accelerate that schedule by coming together collectively to determine what needed to be designed first, so that we could start construction and plan out the full meal deal out to complete. So yeah, just something I thought I'd identify. That's not easy to do on when you're looking at, you know, even construction management or some of the other delivery models. They don't allow that flexibility, because in IPD you also have all teams in that big room talking about that same decision process. So little unique over other delivery models.
Yep, absolutely. We had some big issues along the way. COVID in Canada here, we had you know, quite restrictive travel conditions. So the whole big room thing came to an end very quickly, and we had to switch to virtual, which this is not unique to IPD. This is the same for many teams during this era. you know, Lloydminster does have a significant cold season. Cold construction season was interesting. Just seeing the constructors plan around that. What work can we do? How do we get that going? We had plans to do a pre-engineered building fabrication very early in the project to start work inside a building space. You know, Amazon at the same time decided to build a great big storage facility in Edmonton. All the pre-engineered building fabrication went straight into that project and not into a wastewater project. So we had to divert resources away from that plan and readjust the work areas that we're going to work on. Escalation was a big one. And, you know, we haven't talked much about technology on this webinar, but one of the things we did do is we were able to introduce the latest MBR technology at the right time in this project. And that cost advantage of using the latest technology was actually able to mitigate a lot of the escalation that we were seeing in the project. So that was a good example of a technology vendor and its technology advancement, actually being able to bring a latest technology in that had lower operational cost, but was also being able to deliver it at a lower cost profile that helped offset some of this escalation. A few quick photos, you know, BIM model, what the plant looks like today. If you want to know more about this plant, there's excellent YouTube material. There was a grand opening the other day that has a great video profiling this plant, so you can go on there and look at that. Primary clarifier, as we mentioned.
Rob, just real quick on that one, because maybe a lot of people are wondering, you know, if you're building an MBR, why do you have a massive primary clarifier? So as I stated earlier, like we're very oil gas industry driven here in Lloydminster, and one of the, I would say, fairly unique, because we haven't really found another municipality, and if you are working for a municipality that has this issue, I'd love to connect with you. We do get from time to time large blobs of crude oil that end up in our sanitary system that we have to deal with, and part of the IPD process and the pits that Rob was talking about, they were tasked with finding a solution to that, and there was some cost in the validation report to deal with that. What they ended up resulting on was the primary clarifier was the best way to do that. Now that came at a higher cost than what was anticipated in the validation report. So the team, the IPD team, and that's all 5 partners together, had to figure out where are we going to find other cost savings. And Rob just spoke to one of those, that moving to the new membrane actually did end up saving some capital costs, which allowed us to spend a little more in some other areas, i.e. the primary clarifier. So it kind of just try and emphasize IPD is very, very flexible and moving. I think the biggest parameters are you're delivering on this time and on this cost, and here's what happens if you're over that budget, and here's what happens if you're under that budget, and the team has the flexibility to move and be nimble within that, and there's many changes throughout that process.
Yep, it's a great example. Picture the membrane trains, treating the mixed liquor and producing permeate. And as I say, there's some good stuff on YouTube if you want to look at some more photos. I'm going to hand it off to Don at the end here, just to talk about the end result for our project and what his perspectives are at the end of this road.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think, to say it very eloquently, this was a project that will go down as probably one of the best projects City of Lloydminster currently has built. We built the plant in a very tight time frame with a very tight budget. There's, you know, as part of our IPD process, there were no change orders. To go through a project in the time we did with the shutdown of COVID, with the massive inflation of costs and the supply chain issues, we still managed to build this project on the budget we had set out before that pandemic came to fruition. Now, I'm not saying there weren't changes, because there, like I just said, there's there was thousands of changes throughout the project, many every day. And a prime example of one is, we had a pump designed to go in a specific location. When they were going to put the BIM model together and lay it out in person, like our our operators were a part of that process and brought up a concern that if that pump goes there, how am I going to work on it? So very quickly, the IPD team went and looked at that, figured out a different location for that pump, and that pump was put in, and now our operation staff can maintain it and operate it efficiently, where that type of stuff never really happened before. We also had a couple owner directives, and owner directives are instructions to the project team to either build or delete items. So we had a couple of owner directives on this. But as far as change orders, we didn't have a GC contractor coming to say, well, engineers, you designed this improperly. Here's a change order to fix that problem. The schedule, we were ahead of schedule, which is another thing I'm extremely proud of. With the tight time frame we were given, and through everything we went through with the pandemic and stuff like that, we were compliant and delivering this prior to December of 2023. I think we were commissioning in October, which is 2 months early, which is quite a feat. The operations team, successful transition. I don't even know if there's a transition. Typically there's a transition where you build the project and you bring the operators in and say, here's the keys, now go operate it and figure it out. Our operators were involved in this project for the full 2.5 years through construction. They were there on a day-to-day basis. They were providing input. When we commissioned that, it wasn't really a turnover. It was them part of our commissioning and just taking over operations like they had been. So that was massive to our staff, to our plant manager, to the people that are involved in this plant on a day-to-day basis. That was very important to them. And again, we're producing an extremely high quality effluent. You can just see the results if you're ever in our area and want to do a tour. The water is, in my opinion, a lot cleaner than what's coming out of the North Saskatchewan River and what we're putting back, and that was very important to us. And I see there was a question on there around several large industry users. Did that impact your choices on what technology to implement? I think our goal there, the industry reuse was something that was very important to us, and the selection process was give us the best water that's going to give us our best bang for our buck on a resale perspective. Now, in saying that, we've been working with our local industry users, some that are coming into our area and will be able to build their plants to adjust for the water quality that they're going to get. And we have some that are currently in operation that are going to have to do some capital investment in order to take that raw water. As a municipality, it's our job to ensure that, if the reuse is important to the city, that we're reducing the amount of water those industries are pulling out of North Saskatchewan River, which allows more water downstream. So we have to make that effluent lucrative enough for those industries to use that. So we're still in that process. And then winning awards. I mean, it's always nice to build a project, and I can tell you I'm extremely proud of this project, and Rob and anybody that's been a part of the project fully understands that winning awards is just icing on the cake. And we were awarded by the Saskatchewan Urban Municipality Association, which is the municipal association for the entire province of Saskatchewan. They awarded this project as the top municipal initiative in 2024, which is a pretty esteemed award in Saskatchewan for municipalities. And we also, actually just 2 weeks ago, I was out in Banff the Canadian Municipal Administrators Association awarded our project the 2024 Willis Award for Innovation. And that's national wide. So we've been recognized both on the provincial and national level, and that's something I'm extremely proud of as an SMT member for this. Some of our community benefits. I'm still working on validation of this number, but I'm pretty confident, and I've said this. I've presented on our project many times already, and I'm pretty confident to say that if we would have built this project through normal, I don't even want to call it normal, through other delivery models, we would have been easy in the 100 million, 90 to $100 million range. Just based on, other projects we have here at the city and other projects I've seen around the province, Alberta and Saskatchewan, it's very easy to see an escalation of price, especially through COVID and the pandemic. Lots of other projects we're seeing 20-30% cost overruns on their projects. So I'm pretty confident to say we probably would have been in that 90 to 100 million if we weren't doing this through IPD, and that's a savings of about 10 to 20 million on our taxpayers, and more importantly, saves $20 million on our debt limit. So as a municipality, and if you work for a municipality, your margins are very thin on how much money you can borrow, and the amount of infrastructure deficits are massive. So planning and organizing how you spend that debt limit is very important. So we definitely didn't impact that. The reuse and discharge options was another one. Again, back to our old lagoon, we had one point of discharge, and that was pumping through a 40-year-old pipe system back to the North Saskatchewan River. That was, it's approaching its end of life. It's probably close to a $30-40 million liability on the city to replace the pipeline and in that system. So important for the city was alternative discharge options. And our plant, we went from one. This plant has 3 discharge options, and they're the current discharge to the North Saskatchewan River is 1. Our reuse option of pumping to industry users is 2. And then we also have an option to discharge into the local wetland to the east of us. And that was probably a bigger driver in the technology selection than it was actually the reuse. We wanted to make sure that what we were going to discharge was going to be compliant to discharge into any water body, and that was extremely important to us. And then lastly, this was more so around the culture, and I know Rob kind of spoke to that earlier. The culture of the team, the IPD team, the people that came in to work on our projects, whether it's subcontractor employees, the employees of the partners, they really connected with our community and really went to bat for our community, which is extremely rare in my opinion and what I've seen in past projects. The IPD team, they were out in our community for 2.5 years. Lots of guys that were on these projects were here for 2 to 5 or 2.5 years. We had 2 of the largest donations our community has ever seen, and we're talking in $5,000 cash plus 3,000 pounds of food to our local food bank and providers, and that was really well received by our community and something our council was extremely proud of and something I'm proud of as well. So it wasn't just cost saving benefits, there was massive benefits to the community. Outside of that, we put probably 10 to 15 million dollars directly back into local businesses that pay business fees within our community. That was a mandate of our administration that, as much as we can give to local businesses and contractors, we wanted to do that. And that came in at roughly 10 plus million. So that was a huge injection into our economy here at Lloydminster as well.
And Don, I know we've got a few lessons learned on the next slide, but we're closing in on an hour. window. So for folks that want to see some of the lessons learned from the city's perspective, you can look at the PDF document that WEF will send you, or that would be the best thing to go and check out there. I think, Donna, if we sum up the city's feelings on your project, I mean, we talked about using a collaborative delivery model to try and maximize the value of an infrastructure project that you had to do. And I think, in my mind, I see we used IPD model to try and make sure that we had the maximum ability to control cost that we could, the maximum ability to ensure the schedule could be hit, and also a way to bring multiple parties, including actually a technology vendor, along to try and make sure that we got as much out of this infrastructure project as we could for all the other things that the city was interested in, right? Those goals and objectives that you set for the IPD team. You'd do IPD again?
Yeah. And I know we're running out of time. Just, we had a project where we are building a new arena here, and I think knowing what we know today, we weren't far enough along in our IPD at the wastewater treatment plant to use that as an example. But I can guarantee you that if we would have been further along in our wastewater treatment plant project, because we were still prior to validation at that point, we would have built our arena by IPD, and we will definitely be using IPD when the project allows for that, for sure. Yeah, 100%. I'm a huge supporter of it, and I think municipalities need to have a look at that. It is a good way of saving money for taxpayers and delivering a little bit differently.
Awesome. Cool. I think that'll do us for today. As I say, there's a recording follow-up here, and I know Regina's got a link there for the PDF for the slides. I hope everybody enjoyed the story of the City of Lloydminster's wastewater treatment plant. I think it's a great one. And if you've got any questions, reach out to me or to Don directly, and we'll be happy to answer your questions there.
Yep. Thank you very much for allowing us to tell our story.
All right, this has actually been fantastic. Thank you guys so much. This actually concludes today's e-showcase. Thank you all for attending. The recording will be available at webfiresguide.web.org, and we will be sending all registrants an email tomorrow with that link. But please visit our event calendar to sign up for a future webcast. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Regina.
Sure.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye.